The gel was warmer than I expected. A small, kind mercy in the cool, dim room. My husband, Raj, held my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. On the screen, gray shapes swirled like smoke, a mysterious universe I was helping to create. The technician's face was a mask of professional focus. Then she paused. Her eyes flicked from the screen to me, to Raj, and back to the screen. The circles his thumb was drawing stopped. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't the quiet of concentration anymore. It was the heavy, waiting quiet of a held breath. She cleared her throat, her voice unusually gentle. "I'll just get the doctor to take a look. One moment." She left, and the universe on the screen kept swirling. Raj squeezed my hand. "Probably just being thorough," he whispered. But in that suspended silence, a terrible, formless knowing began to coil in my stomach. This wasn't about the baby's health. This was about a story the baby was already telling, a story I couldn't yet read. My name is Aditi. For 7 years, I had been Raj's wife. Our marriage was what many would call modern and comfortable. We were both architects, meeting in college, building a life together blueprint by blueprint. We had a beautiful apartment, a social circle of similar couples, and a life filled with travel and good taste. Raj was ambitious, charismatic, the kind of man who commanded a room. I was quieter, more detail-oriented, the one who made the plans he so brilliantly presented into livable realities. Our partnership felt balanced. He was the visionary, pushing for bigger projects, more recognition. I was the foundation, managing the practicalities of our firm, our home, our life. We were a team. Or so I believed. Our desire for a child was the one project that had remained stubbornly in the drafting phase. Years of hoping, of charts and temperatures had led us here, to this ultrasound room. This pregnancy felt like our greatest collaborative success. Raj had been different during the pregnancy. Attentive, but in a theatrical way. He documented everything for social media. The positive test, my first craving, the tiny socks he bought. Building the narrative, he'd say with a wink. He loved the idea of a family, the image of it. The reality, my fatigue, my mood swings, the sheer physical vulnerability, seemed to confuse him. He'd joke, "You used to be so tough in client meetings." I'd laugh it off, but it stung. I was building a human. That required a different kind of toughness. I saw his love for me as intertwined with his love for our shared vision, a perfect life, perfectly executed. I never considered that his vision might have other subcontractors. I was so busy being the reliable foundation, I never checked if the ground underneath us was solid. Dr. Mehta came in, her smile warm, but her eyes serious. She took the technician's place, gliding the probe over my belly again. The gray universe reappeared. "Everything looks structurally perfect," she said, her voice calm. "Strong heartbeat, good growth." Raj let out an audible sigh of relief. "Thank God." Dr. Mehta continued, her gaze fixed on the screen. "We're just doing some standard measurements." She clicked a few times, freezing an image. She turned to look at both of us, her expression shifting into something more neutral, more careful. "Aditi, your dates are very precise, yes? Based on your last cycle?" "Yes," I said, a thread of anxiety pulling tight. "Exactly 8 weeks and 3 days today." She nodded slowly. "I see." She turned the screen slightly. "Based on the development I'm seeing here, the size of the gestational sac, the fetal pole, this pregnancy is measuring at almost 10 weeks, not 8. The room tilted. 10 weeks? That was impossible. I knew my body. I knew the date. Raj's hand went stiff in mine. Dr. Mehta's next words were spoken softly, but they landed like stones. "This kind of discrepancy can sometimes happen, but given the precise dating, it's notable." She looked directly at me, a deep, uncomfortable empathy in her eyes. Then her gaze slid to Raj, whose face had gone pale and rigid. The unspoken words hung in the air. toxic and heavy. The dates don't match. The baby is older than it should be. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. The conclusion was a shadow in the room, and it pointed squarely at me. Raj pulled his hand away from mine. The sound of his wedding band scraping against my knuckles was terribly loud. The ride home was a glacial silence. Raj stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. I tried to speak, my voice trembling. "Raj, you know that's impossible. You know me." "I know what the doctor said," he cut in, his voice like cold steel. 10 weeks. You do the math." The accusation was now out in the open, freezing the air between us. That night, he moved his pillow to the sofa. "I need space to think," he said, not looking at me. The space became a new continent. He stopped coming home for dinner. When he was home, he was a ghost, moving through rooms without seeing me. He canceled the gender reveal party he'd been so excited to plan. "What's the point?" he said flatly over the phone, "until we know what this is." The social isolation began subtly. He started taking calls in another room, his voice a low murmur. Once I picked up the house phone by mistake and heard his brother's voice, "But are you sure it's even yours?" I put it down, my hand shaking. The final, cruel twist was financial. A week after the scan, he sat me down at our dining table. "We need to be practical, Aditi, given the situation. I've paused the joint investments into the nursery fund, and I've put a hold on adding you to the new life insurance policy. We need clarity before we commit more resources." Resources, clarity, situation. My pregnancy, our child, had been reduced to a risk assessment. I was no longer his wife carrying his child. I was a disputed contract. The loneliness was absolute. I was grieving the loss of my husband while he was still in the house, while our child grew inside me. I'd sit in the future nursery, now just an empty room, and feel the baby kick, a little flutter of life that he refused to acknowledge. He had tried and convicted me based on a measurement without a single question asked in my defense. The truth came not from another test, but from a forgotten memory. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, running over the last few months in my mind. The dates, the impossible dates. And then I remembered. 9 weeks ago, Raj had been away for a 4-day industry conference in Goa. He'd been unusually distant on the phone, claiming bad reception. A cold clarity washed over me. I got out of bed and went to his study. He was, of course, not there. I logged into our shared laptop, my heart hammering. I went to the email account he used for travel. I searched for the hotel confirmation. I found it. The Sea Breeze Resort and Spa, Goa. Check-in and check-out dates matched his trip. My eyes scrolled down. The confirmation was for one guest. One. But the room type was listed as King Suite Double Occupancy, and there, at the bottom, was a special request in the notes field. As discussed, please ensure the champagne and rose petals are arranged prior to arrival. Thank you. The room spun. Rose petals, champagne, a double occupancy suite for one guest? With trembling fingers, I navigated to our joint credit card statement from that month. There it was, a charge from the Sea Breeze Resort, and right below it, another charge from the same day, from a high-end boutique jeweler in Panjim, an amount that could buy a very nice piece of jewelry. He hadn't been at a conference. He'd been on a romantic getaway with someone else, right around the time my baby would have been conceived. The doctor's measurement wasn't evidence of my infidelity. It was a biological clock ticking out the timeline of his. He had been unfaithful, and now, to cover his own guilt, to preempt any suspicion falling on him, he had seized on a medical discrepancy to paint me as the villain. The betrayal wasn't just the other woman. It was the brutal, calculated strategy of making me the criminal to hide his own crime. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. A profound, icy calm settled over me. The pain was still there, a raw wound, but it was now covered by a clear sheet of resolve. He wanted a business arrangement? Fine, we would have one. I took photos of everything, the hotel confirmation, the credit card statement. I emailed them to a new, secure account I created. The next day, I called my father, not for emotional support, but for strategic guidance. My father, a retired civil servant, was a man of quiet principle and meticulous records. I went to my parents' house and showed him the evidence. His face, usually so placid, darkened with a slow, burning anger. "We will proceed with care," he said, his voice low, "and with precision." The plan was twofold. First, establish biological truth. I privately consulted a different obstetrician, explaining the situation without drama. I opted for a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, a simple blood draw for me that could isolate the baby's DNA and compare it to Raj's. I had the kit sent to my parents' address. I needed that irrefutable fact. Second, secure my position. With my father's help, I quietly contacted a lawyer, a fierce woman named Miss Kapoor, who specialized in marital law. I gave her all the evidence, the financial hold, the emotional abandonment, and the proof of his affair. I began, secretly, to catalog every asset, every investment, every detail of our shared financial life that I had helped build. I was no longer the hurt wife. I was a stakeholder in a dissolving partnership, and I was auditing the books. The paternity test results arrived at my parents' house a week later. I didn't open them. I placed the sealed envelope in my handbag. That evening, Raj was home, pretending to work in his study. I walked in and placed the envelope on his desk, next to the sleek laptop where he'd planned his getaway. "What's this?" he asked, not looking up. "Open it." He sighed, a sound of profound irritation, and slit the envelope open. He scanned the single page. His face, which had been set in a permanent frown of victimhood, underwent a terrifying transformation. The color drained, then flooded back in a blotchy red. Confusion, then dawning horror, then a furious denial flashed in his eyes. This is a fake. You fabricated this," he spluttered, rising from his chair. "It's from a certified lab, Raj. You can verify the codes. The baby is yours. The dates were always wrong, or the measurement was off. But you never considered that, did you? You jumped to the worst possible conclusion about me because it was convenient, because it distracted from this." I placed a printed copy of the hotel confirmation and jeweler receipt on top of the paternity results. He looked at the paper, then at me, his bravado crumbling into panic. "Aditi, it was a mistake, a one-time thing. It meant nothing." "It meant enough for rose petals and champagne," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It meant enough for you to accuse me of cheating, to financially abandon me, to emotionally desert your own child. You didn't just betray me. You tried to destroy me to cover your tracks." He was babbling now, excuses and pleas tumbling out. "We can fix this. We can go to therapy. For the baby." "Ms. Kapoor, my lawyer, will be in touch," I said, turning to leave. "She has all the evidence, your financial coercion, proof of your affair, your abandonment during pregnancy. We can settle this through mediation, fairly, or we can do it in court. I'm prepared for either." "The choice," I said, echoing the cold practicality he'd once shown me, "is yours." I left him standing there, surrounded by the elegant architecture of the life we'd built, holding the proof that he had blown it all apart with his own deceit. He expected tears, pleas, desperation. He was met with a cold, forensic dismantling of his own narrative. We went through mediation. It was brutally efficient. With Ms. Kapoor's guidance, I secured a strong settlement, a significant portion of our shared assets, full ownership of our architectural firm, which I had largely run, and substantial child support. The divorce was finalized before our daughter Anya was born. Raj tried, briefly and awkwardly, to re-enter the picture after Anya's birth, shamed by his family and the reality of his daughter. I allow supervised visits. Not for him, but for her. He is a distant, somewhat confused figure in her life. I feel no hatred, only a distant pity for a man who traded a real family for a fantasy. Anya and I live in a smaller, sun-filled apartment. It is filled with her laughter and the tangible love of my parents. The firm is thriving under my direction. The silence here is not the silence of neglect, but of peace. I look at my daughter sometimes, her perfect features, and I feel a sorrow for the father she will never truly know. But I also feel a fierce, unshakable pride. We survived the earthquake he caused. We rebuilt. This is my real-life story, a family drama that started in a doctor's office and ended in a quiet courtroom. I learned that the most dangerous lies are not the ones told to you, but the ones someone tells themselves to justify their own actions. And I learned that the strongest foundation you can ever stand on is not someone else's love, but your own unshakable truth. Sometimes the clearest picture doesn't come from an ultrasound screen, but from the courage to look unflinchingly at the reflection of someone else's character. If this story of quiet strength and difficult truth resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. For more calm, reflective narratives about navigating life's toughest challenges, do subscribe to Real Queens of Courage. Thank you for listening.